Hello, hello. This is Christina Barner. You guys are watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we are going to be talking about um, Joe Biden and his angry State of the Union speech, which I wasn't fond of and did not want to watch, but someone had to do it, and I suppose it's kind of my job here. So I went ahead and sucked it up, and I can report that it was a hot mess. It was really a hot mess for all sorts of reasons. And the decorum was just kind of like, you had people yelling and all sorts of kinds of things like that. And the manner of dress with some people was interesting. But, Biden got the energy that he was giving and he deserved because he really decided to go ahead and make his speech like it was a campaign speech and not in a campaign speech. I'm going to make myself look really good kind of way. It was a campaign speech. I'm going to tear down my enemies and come for my enemies. And so he's been divisive like his whole entire presidency, his whole entire campaign from the first time when he ran against Trump in 2020, and that hasn't changed. And perhaps it's even getting worse. And I'm not surprised that's the route he went, but it's definitely a route he should have reconsidered before they wrote up that speech and how many ever drafts they did and got to that point in that night where they're like, oh yeah, let's really just open up this speech in a very um antagonistic way. I also want to talk about the passing of Akira Toriyama. He's the creator of Dragon Ball, and as you can see, huge fan of his work. And so he actually passed away on the first, from the reports that I read, but it just I don't know if that's something that they didn't really make public until last night, because that's when it was really trending and you saw everybody really talking about it. So and news reports coming out. So maybe they didn't report it until after they had the funeral and all that kind of stuff. But I because that's pretty big news to not have been like have blown up by now. But yeah, it was culturally, that show just had such a huge impact. So I just want to reminisce and talk about it a bit. I'm gonna tail that into the that'll be the second half or the end of the show. We're gonna focus on the politics at first, and then I will nerd out and reverence uh a man who really really defined so much of pop culture and anime, and that's had such a huge impact all around the world. But before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website for articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, you guys can consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. It does cost a stream and run my website, all that stuff. You guys can support. I appreciate it. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can do super chats. And if you guys are watching it back later, you guys can still send stars, but you guys can also send super chats as well. I know you guys can't all watch it live, but I do appreciate every view, every comment, every subscriber, every person who finds that they're unsubscribed and have to resubscribe. I don't know what that's about, but I appreciate you guys. You guys can also check out different merch that we have available at the store, like black tea mugs and different t-shirts that we have there on the site, like this cool Frederick Douglass shirt about the Constitution being a glorious liberty document and other things like that. So I encourage you guys to check out the merch. And I do have books you guys can check out on Amazon. I have 17 that are published. Most are fiction. So there's some action, adventure, romance, drama, historical fiction, etc. I like to write a ton of different things. And then I have my book. I have a faith book called Slay Your Fear. That's one of my nonfiction books. And that another book I have is, of course, God is blatantly against abortion. So you guys can check that out. By the way, my sister did the artwork there for the hand of God reaching out to the little baby hand. So she did a fantastic job there. So we'll hop to it. So the State of the Union address was a hot mess. It really was. Now, there's some commentary from people talking about, oh, like it was incomprehensible with the stuff that Biden was saying. He did mumble, he did slur his words. Um, you know, but you could understand him. It was, it was clear in most parts. And some of the things were just didn't things that didn't make sense were blatantly untrue. Like at one point, he talked about how he like taught Constitution for 12 years. It's like, where? What are you talking about? That's not true. And I watched the backstage with this Daily Wire fellas talking about it afterwards. And Jeremy Boring is like, I think he's confusing himself with Obama. Like, legitimately, I think he's been like so used to just talking about Obama. He's just mixing things in with his own story. So, but Biden is he likes to tell tall tales, man. He really does. But first of all, it started late because you had people who were blocking the roads. And I don't know how long people are going to continue to tolerate that. To me, it seems very interesting that, they're quick to arrest and throw people at, you know, in front of abortion clinics or whatever in jail. Uh, but you have people who do like kind of eco terrorism and throw paint on artwork or whatever, or these people who block the roads and disrupt all these people's lives. And protesting is fine, but you got to do that stuff properly. And you would think they'd be harsher on people who would block the president from the State of the Union speech. So he started late, and they were doing that over Gaza situation. Uh, so he started late, and he just came in hot. And I think I mentioned this yesterday, or I was just thinking about the speech. I didn't want to watch it. Someone had thanked me when I had mentioned wrote about it on Facebook, and they're like, "Better you than me." And I said, "Don't say I never did anything for you." And yesterday, before the speech, I was at a meeting, um, working with the Fallen and Wounded Soldiers Fund, and we were planning our big fundraiser for the year. We want to raise $500,000, and actually, we're halfway there. Especially because of this man Jack who does this walk, and he's gained a lot of attention, and he's gonna attempt, I think, a world record. But he's gonna walk from he left today to go to California. He's gonna walk from California to DC. And so he got some big sponsors, and the things that he's raising is going toward the veterans. And with this organization, 97 cents on every dollar goes towards veterans and families of vets in need. And so at this event, we raise money. We have singing and food and drinks, and we do a ceremony where we honor different veterans who have served. And I'm usually there asked to sing a song and stuff. And so it's in Oakland County. It's a great event if you're in the area. It's at this estate. So it's a nice property. You have people coming in, landing on helicopters. It's a really, really cool event. But we raise money, lots of money. And so we want to keep out doing it and keep raising the bar every year. So I was there, and I was hoping that the meeting would go kind of long so I wouldn't have to go to the State of the Union. And so that didn't happen. Yeah. So I got home in time to listen to it, and it just started hot right off the bat. And Biden, he really needs to pivot and show people that he can moderate, because people wanted to kind of go back to some kind of normalcy. That was the big pitch. Even though people had money and stuff under Trump, etc., people, they made people feel like they were living in chaos every day because the news made it seem like it was chaos every day, like he was a plant from Russia installed by Putin, and all kinds of different stuff, that every sort of little thing Trump would do was a scandal. Like, oh my gosh, he fed the koi fish wrong. Oh my gosh, he walked in front of the queen. Oh my gosh, does he put ketchup on his steaks? Like every day, there was some kind of exaggerated story about Trump. I'm not saying he didn't say things that weren't offensive or things that made people raise their eyebrows or whatever. There are things he did push policy wise that were like 5 alarm as a conservative. I'm like, bro, you need to walk that back. And he usually did. He'd have, maybe, I assume, some kind of conversation with someone and would roll things back. So he was by no means perfect, but they made it seem like it was chaos nonstop, and everybody was talking about the news all the time, and people just wanted to feel like they were going back to some kind of normalcy. The adults were back in the room, etc. So Biden was supposed to be like a old reliable or something, and he just uh has been an angry, mean old man who hasn't led very competently, and seems like the whole world is kind of slipping through his fingers the tighter he tries to grip onto it. And so it's making some people reconsider Trump, and it seems like it's making, from like Nate Silver and different reports that I've seen, it definitely making people reconsider Trump in a way that I thought kind of wasn't possible, but he's just that bad. But if Biden gave people reason to be like, no, I can do better, then people probably wouldn't feel like they need to reconsider this issue. But like, the border is a top priority for many people. And he hasn't shown that he's ready to be competent or on that at all. Just a lot of blame to go around when it comes to things like that. So his whole thing, he's like, soul of the nation. We did heal the soul of the nation, save the soul of the nation. Funny that that's Biden's rhetoric, and the top movie right now that everyone's talking about is about like false messiahs and other things like that. With dude, like, don't put your faith in people like that. They will let you down. And instead of being aspirational and to people and stuff, and inspiring the folks, that's not what he did. That's not what he did at all. When Trump would do State of the Unions, he was such a good showman. One time I was watching the State of the Union, what a Trump State of the Unions, and my sister Angelina, she called me and she's like, "Why do people hate him?" She's like listening to him list all these accomplishments, and he's paying honor to different people, you know, at different times. Like, every sort of guest he has is just, he's doing it all so perfectly. And she's just like, if these things are accurate, why I don't, and the country's doing so well, like, I don't understand why people hate him so much. And with Joe Biden, I think it's pretty evident why. You can see why people don't like him. So I'm going to play a little bit like of the beginning, so you guys can get the feeling of how this was. And which, by the way, he didn't even like allow the speaker to introduce him. Which Speaker Johnson said that was him. He missed his cue. That wasn't me, and I didn't want to interrupt him. So I just want you to know immediately what was at the beginning, the forefront of his mind. We're not going to watch a lot of his speech, but I just want to, because as soon as it started, I was like, oh gosh, here's where we're going.
Thank you. David Jill. Good evening. Good evening. If I were smart, I'd go home now. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans. In January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine.
So I don't know what's going on there, but that's enough of that. I just so once he started going down that road, mentioning Roosevelt and said, oh, we have to face the threat to democracy here and abroad, and it was very clear where this man was going. Very clear what this man was going, and he does mention January 6th, and he condemns, folks for not doing enough with the Ukraine. I with Ukraine, I don't talk about it a lot, but there's definitely people who know that a bit of foreign policy better than I do. But to me, it seems strange. Like, you cannot make this pitch. I think it's important to stop. Like, I think it's true that Putin will do whatever Putin can do as far as acquiring land and building up Russia and so on. I think that's absolutely 100% true. And he'll test the limits, especially if there are weak leaders around. And I think he knows he can probably get away with quite a few things with Biden. Probably tested the waters here more than he probably would have if Trump was still, in that chair. And I think so. I do think he's a threat, definitely, to the safety of, I suppose, much of the world. But I think we give so many mixed messages, because on one hand, you're like, it's the most important thing in the world, but we're just going to keep sending the money, and we're not going to send troops on the ground, and we're not going to, I don't know, send them the best things that they could have to perhaps win the war. And, but we're going to keep helping them out so they can fight their own battles, which is admirable, I suppose. But again, the whole desperation pitch of like, this is the most important thing. If it was I don't get me wrong. I don't want the war to escalate. I don't want American troops to be on the ground. But if you're not willing to do everything possible to win, then it can't possibly be the most important thing ever. Does that make sense? It just seems very theatrical to me, and I don't know what the end game is. And I understand that it's a good thing for Ukraine to wound Russia's army to the extent that it has. But people do also want to know what the off ramp is here, because it can't go on forever, and they're not being a good steward of the money that we're sending over there. Um, from different reports that I've seen and we've talked about on the show. So I don't it's also very strange. That's the first thing that you want to talk about at the American State of the Union address. Um, so many things going on with education, with children's education, and the border, which he talked about the border a little bit, but that was pretty far along in a speech. Like he talked about abortion and things like that far earlier. He talked about like wanting the Equality Act, and uh that was kind of a blip. He started throwing out things out there, but you can, it was obvious what was important to him, things like abortion and hot button stuff. He did talk about Israel a bit and scolded Israel for a minute, which uh, we tried to help getting aid in to Gaza. Apparently, something was wrong with when they were dropping the shipment, and it killed people because their parachutes didn't eject or whatever. So it just was like a big gravity bomb. So another fine job there, Mr. Biden. Um, what happens when people are like, you know what, just stop helping? You're not helping. Um, anyway, I think people are concerned about the amount of money that's going out to other places, and we see that Americans are hurting so much while he's pretending that there's some kind of great comeback. And um I'm not saying there's not good reports and other things out there, but people really don't feel it. I saw a video of a woman. She says she's a bleeding heart liberal, and she was just kind of really taken aback by the State of the Union address, because she's just like, the inflation going down, that's not anything that I'm seeing in real life. And by the way, the rate of inflation, it's not as high, but it hasn't gone. It's still, the inflation is still up. Things are still inflated. So um, people aren't buying a speech. But to compare Jan 6 to World War II or the American Civil War, which was bloody and awful, and to say that the threats of democracy are so dire compared to anything like that is just silly. It's silly. January 6th was a riot, and it was terrible, and it was embarrassing. Um, for sure. Horrific watch seeing some of that imagery. Um, but was it like the Civil War? No. He sounds as silly as those DNC shills that they pay on TikTok that say dumb things like January 6th was our September 11th, you know? But hey, the DNC keeps paying them, um, to say crazy stuff like that. And they keep saying that to their young, crazy little echo chamber, hoping that they will go out and they'll vote for them. Um, but the purpose of comparing, bringing up those things and talking about the threat to democracy is to point out that the people who aren't on his side are the bad guys, and he really needs to not appeal to his really crazy niche base, but to appeal to more moderates and to appeal to independents, because those independents, I suppose, are up for grabs. They're up for grabs. And by polling that has come out recently, it kind of looks like Trump has a bit of an edge here. So it's very likely that next year he won't be giving that address, but the bad orange man will be. Um, yeah, if I was in his shoes, I would want to really do an inspirational sort of speech and tap into an optimistic sort of, we can have a great next 4 years, instead of this dire, like, everyone is so bad, the other side is so bad, you have to vote for me, like they're too dangerous, etc. And I don't buy it. And I've mentioned this many times, but if you think about threats to democracy, you can be upset about how Trump conducted himself after 2020 election, and January 6th and all those things. However, the I think the bigger threat to our system is all the things that people, because at the end of the day with January 6th, they cleared those people out, and they Mike Pence led the rest of the ceremony, and they certified the election results. It wasn't We were not close to like losing our whole country that day because there were you know idiots who decided to act up. And I'm not trying to downplay how scary it was for the people there that day. But it wasn't the Civil War, right? It wasn't the American Civil War. Um, and knowing how so many people are attached to Trump. Now, there's a lot of people who like Trump. There's a lot of people who vote for Trump. There's not, and there's a lot of people who would, I don't know, I guess, do what they did on January 6th for Trump, but um, it's not the Civil War kind of level threat. It's just not. Um, but the problem here with the Democrat side, though, that is really I would say a threat to democracy. Yesterday, our whole show was talking about lies in the media about different people running for office, lies in the media covering for Joe Biden. And if people are supposed to make decisions about who they're going to vote for, and the media is purposely misinforming them about the candidates and the different accomplishments about the candidates, or lying about like the person who's running for a North Carolina governor, they just told terrible lies about him, and so we covered that. The AP tried to kind of cover for Joe Biden because there were reports coming out about him flying different people from different countries into the United States, and like over 300,000. And the headline was like, "Oh, these unfounded claims." But past the headline, you read the actual article, and they confirm everything is happening. But they know what they're doing when they put the things in the headline. So we talked about that, and we talked about some other things. And so if they're controlling the media and trying to control the minds of the people to think a particular way that is untruthful, is will we not consider that to be a threat if people can't properly be informed about the world and the candidates and the news? I think that's a pretty big problem. Then you have like big conspiracies like the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop. And you have people like Sam Harris that are like, well, was the ends kind of justify the means, and it's okay kind of conspiracy, because I think Trump is so dangerous that it's basically okay to lie about the laptop. And he said like he could have had out of corpses of children in his basement, and it still wouldn't have like changed his. It's still, it still, I guess, would have been worth suppressing the information in order to stop Trump. It like that sort of thinking. Isn't that, you don't think that's a bit of a threat to democracy? How people are suppressing different voices on social media to push certain agendas. The way that people tried to undermine Trump's presidency through the Russia collusion stuff, and other things. Joe Biden trying to push the idea that Trump was letting soldiers knowingly be killed by some kind of bounty, and then he became president. They didn't really apologize for that, misinformation they were trying to spread, but they're trying to spread the idea that the commander in chief doesn't care about the safety of the troops. And they also wanted to push an idea that our American president that people voted for, went to the ballot box and voted for, that he was installed by the Russian president. Joe Biden lying about the laptop, and Hunter Biden's laptop, and like, oh, all these people, intelligence people, signed this letter to say that this just smells of Russian conspiracy, when it was absolutely obvious that was Hunter Biden's laptop. And I know it sounds like a crazy story, him leaving a laptop at a shop or whatever, but he's a crackhead. So once you remember that he's a crackhead, things make a lot of sense about how dumb they are, right? So if you think about how there's so much conspiracy and collusion to try to take down one man, that we're willing to defile institutions and make bad decisions, like what they were trying to do in Colorado to kick Trump off the ballot, was crazy. And it was so crazy that the court, United States Supreme Court ruled in a 9-0 ruling in favor of stopping them and having Trump be on the ballot. They're like, you can't just have one state that gets to make that sort of call, make that sort of decision. So if you have all these people trying to bend the rules, and even the impeachment of Trump, especially the first one, was so stupid. If you actually look at the articles of impeachment, they're so silly. Obstruction of Congress. I'm sorry that the president, that the executive branch doesn't just have to, jump because you say how high or whatever, and you have the audacity to just impeach a obstruction of Congress. If you look at the sort of things they allege that Trump did and the sort of articles that came out back then, there's no reason why they shouldn't impeach Joe Biden right now. I couldn't believe Mitt Romney was like, "Oh, that's so they was upset about them opening an impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden and Hunter and all that stuff." And he had the audacity to vote to impeach Trump, and he's just like, "Well, history is watching." I'm like, he didn't commit any crimes, bro. Like, you just didn't like some of his behavior. Okay, so they create all these really terrible precedents. Joe Biden, the Supreme Court shut him down with the student loans thing, and he's just like, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm gonna do it anyway, and I'm gonna send a letter to the people knowing that, hey, I canceled your loans. Oh, okay. You're not supposed to do that, and but okay, it's clearly a bribe. So, so you really want to be president again? So, if people want to talk about threats to democracy, you know how they're running things, kind of seems like a big red flag, flashing red lights everywhere. All of this to stop one man, and it won't even just really be to one man. I wager they'd be willing to do that to a lot of Republicans, and a lot of things that they'd really like to pass legislatively, if they could get like a super majority in the House and the Senate, or had the control of the Supreme Court. Or if they could just have control of the Supreme Court, stack it, and you know, uh, rule from the bench. Uh, they'd want to transform the country to a point where you're not going to have Republicans be able to get any sort of control that would matter to push good policies on the people. You know, will push policies that would protect the liberties of the people. I rather say. So Trump is just one dude. Granted, he's a very charismatic dude with a lot of fans who are very passionate, perhaps too passionate. Um, and I think that some of that passion, especially like how I've seen it play out in Michigan politics and some other states, it is concerning because there's been kind of a wake of destruction, a lot of destruction in his wake, with some of the local stuff going on and the infrastructure of the Republican Party, that I've talked about a little bit in the past, and I could go into more later. So there's concerns there, but those sorts of things should make Democrats happy. Um, but if you want to talk about real threats to democracy, the fact that the whole system is just stacked a particular way is just insane. Like, we shouldn't have needed Elon Musk to buy Twitter to have a platform where people could say things like Ellen Page is a woman and not expect to get their stuff taken down, you know? Um it- That's so absurd. It's so absurd. It's so crazy to me. I could talk about abortion, and I don't know if I've said enough about it now to have it on my screen when people watch us back later. But plenty of content, if it's about abortion or something, they'll have a link that'll take you to the NHS or whatever it is site, about abortion, and it'll say abortion is just the end of a pregnancy. Oh, really? I didn't know my C-section was an abortion. Like, so you have this generation of really, really dumb broads and dudes who you have to argue with, and they're just like, yeah, I'm for abortion all 9 months. When it gets viable, you just give birth. And I'm like, you don't go to Planned Parenthood to go give birth. We're not marching in the cold in January so you can have to stop you from having a C-section on an alive baby. That is so stupid. But they have to blend all these things together and muddle the message to be able to defend their worldview. And it's so ridiculous. We can't even have honest conversations. Don't you think that's an actual threat to democracy? When truth is an enemy? So Trump is a one man, and he's an old man. Biden is an old man, Trump is an old man. They won't be here for significantly that much longer. And I don't know how much the MAGA movement is going to set up to. I don't know if they'll kind of groom Junior to be the next person, or just someone kind of MAGA-esque. Matt Gaetz, I'm sure, has higher aspirations or whatnot. We'll see what happens. They won't have hold of stuff forever, I don't think. But he won't be here forever. But the system, the immoral system, is still here in place, and there will be someone that'll come and take the place of, the Rachel Maddows of the world. There'll be another one who'll take a place with Joy Reid and so on, and they'll just get more crazy and crazy and lie more and more and more. And while they're lying to the public, or while you have these officials, the deep state, trying to uh, suppress free speech and other things like that, you'll have folks that'll always point the finger at types of folks like Trump as if they're the threat, as if they're the threat. What's more dangerous, the system that's against freedom and knowledge and truth, or one man? What's more dangerous? Like, seriously. Joe Biden, so many things that people don't like about Trump, Joe Biden is that thing and worse. Trump is old. Biden is older. Trump is mean. Joe Biden is mean. Joe Biden is mean. He's not as witty or, charismatic or whatever with Trump, and but if you're not on his good side and you're like pestering him with questions or whatever, he's threatened to fight people and other stuff, challenge them, and he'll say mean stuff to Peter Ducey and other folks. He yells and raises his voice, talks trash. He talked trash to the Republicans throughout the night. If you watch the speech, there are moments when he is just going hard at them. And maybe he really wanted to prove to his base that he was alive and he could fight and he can go on the campaign trail. He's probably not going to go much on the campaign trail, but he's trying to prove that he's still with it and he still has some fight left in him. That's fine. But that's not why people hired you for the job. They hired you for the job because they thought that you were going to restore some normalcy and dignity to the office. That's why they went with this man. And he's very disappointing to many people. Many people. But his tone was just so aggressive. Let me. And at one point, I mentioned how they didn't mention border stuff. until pretty far into the speech. And there's been questions, was he going to talk about Laken Riley? And at one point, the crowd started, Marjorie Taylor Greene and the crowd started, to get rowdy about it. And so he did mention her, and then he got the name wrong. So they've known that people have wanted him to mention the name and to address illegal immigration. And then he brings her up and has a button or something and still says her name wrong.
Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals?
So, yeah, he said Lincoln. So the name is wrong. And you could say, well, they're kind of close. So, honest mistake. You don't make mistakes like that on the national stage with so many people hot about this topic, with someone who passed away. Well, not passed away. She was brutally killed, and which many people blame him. There was an ad that they played. I think Fox aired it and MSNBC aired it. CNN would not air it. Let me see if I can pull it up. My internet's kind of a little slow, so I might not be able to show you guys, but I'll retweet it and you guys can find it that way. But the Democrats were mad though that he's mentioned the word illegals. So you have people like Ilhan Omar saying no one is illegal, because Democrats don't like that language and stuff. You have to say undocumented, right? So Nancy Pelosi said he shouldn't have said that.
Dan.
Now, you should have said undocumented, but that's not a big thing, okay? What's the big thing about
it? No, I actually wasn't even going to ask about that. I was just going to ask more about the moment. But you do think that he should have said undocumented? That wasn't going to be my question.
Well, we usually say undocumented. He said.
Yeah. So there are some Democrats that are pretty upset. Probably more upset about the fact that he called them illegals than the fact that an illegal immigrant killed this young woman. And now I don't even understand what was the point of like him yelling it out, like kind of like, oh, this happens all the time, to was it try to minimize it or just and I know he's trying to blame the Republicans for not passing the bipartisan stupid bill, and he went into some of the things that it would have done or claimed that they would have done. But if they're just going to hire more agents to usher more people and process them faster into the country rather than kick them out, we're going to have an issue. We don't want them processed in here faster so they can stay or whatever. We just restore, not just restore. There's other things that they need to do. But if you put remain in Mexico back in place, that would be a huge step. But Joe Biden, on his very first day in office, decided to do executive orders to start undoing some of the things that Trump did that were bad policies. And instead of just backtracking and trying to do the right thing and implement some sane things, they're just like, oh, well, these Republicans have my hands tied. They didn't tie your hands when you first got in, Joe. We're not stupid. We're not stupid. We know what you did. So just try to undo it. So, but yeah, you heard them yelling at Joe. That was the kind of energy, that wasn't the whole time the energy, but and you hear the yelling and other stuff like that, and you're like, oh my gosh. But he got the energy that he was given. People were heckling him, he was heckling back, like how comedians will do that, but he didn't have good jokes or whatever. He's just, was aggressive with the crowd. Not all the crowd, the Republican crowd. And there was one point where there was a Gold Star father who shouted, and he ended up getting arrested.
Murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. the biggest increase in history. It was then, through my...
Yeah, so Gold Star dad arrested after heckling. I don't people are noting that, if, y- if only these they arrested and these people blocking the streets and stuff with as much speed and passion as they did with that man. Now yelling out, I don't want to watch a State of the Union and people to not have like a basic kind of decorum. I know in Europe people be yelling at stuff all the time in like their parliament and stuff, and um, but we don't normally do stuff like it's not hype like that. And the State of the Union, they could just send a letter, but it's kind of like a whole kind of pageant sort of situation. But as I said, Biden received the energy that he gave. He did not give a inspirational reverence kind of love for the nation. And we did great things and we're going to continue doing great things. And this is why you need to um, vote for me again. It was very much, there's a gun to your head. And these people are scum and they're coming for us. And they're a threat to the democracy. So we've got to win. These guys are the bad guys, and I'm the person who's gonna save the soul of the nation. And that's what it felt like, pretty much right out the gate. Especially when you're comparing World War II and uh, Russia and Civil War, all that stuff. But CNN, there was a funny kind of initial reaction that CNN had to it.
He seemed like Walt Kowalski. You talked about this earlier. He seemed like Walt Kowalski in Gran Torino, screaming at kids, "Get off my lawn!" Like an old guy screaming at kids.
My guess is that when he got into the heart of his agenda, the things that you ridicule about the cost of food and price gouging and so on, I bet you that scored with a lot of people. I think that the populist economic agenda is a powerful thing for him. Look, there are parts of it.
No, people, as I said, people on TikTok, and not everybody on TikTok, but there are definitely people on TikTok that just like, bro, you're not helping me right now. Before the State of the Union, I'm driving and I'm seeing the gas has gone up. I don't know how much gas is where you guys are right now, but it's approaching $4 again. So it's at like about 370 right now. So I'm like, well, I wonder if this is gonna come up. Because I'm like, why is the gas going up, Joe? Why is it going back up? And it seemed like a quick jump too. Because I was, it was like 319 for a minute, and then it jumped to like 350, and I could still find some places. I'm like, okay, maybe I can find it for like 329 or something somewhere, and all of a sudden it was like 370. I'm like, dagnammit, like why is this happening? So it's climbing, and when gas is high, everything gets high because it costs money to go to work. It costs money to drive to the grocery store. It costs money for people to deliver food to that grocery store. It's just a mess for American families. So I would have mentioned, and he actually didn't spend as much time on this as I thought he was going to spend, but I want to play this segment of Joe Biden talking about reproductive freedom, as they call it, and IVF and stuff. Now, reproductive freedom is so silly because reproduction's already happened when you talk about abortion. But they also mentioned IVF. So he mentions Kate Cox, and he also mentions Alabama and their Supreme Court decision. And people have just been spreading so much misinformation about these things.
Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child, but the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to IVF. Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader, defending reproductive freedom, and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again.
So, couple things. Okay, so I'm sorry, the Kate Cox clip actually wasn't in there. I thought it was, but he said AVF, not IVF. So, and he also like mispronounced Roe v. Wade, but the IVF case, I don't know how many times I have to say this. It seems like no one else is listening, I guess, except my listeners who've heard me say it a couple times. But the Alabama Supreme Court case involving the IVF clinic was not criminal. It was civil. And there was 3 sets of parents who were suing a clinic that was supposed to monitor and secure their embryos. What happened was they did not, and a patient wandered in an unsecured door, removed their embryos, and accidentally dropped them. So they wanted to sue for wrongful death. And the clinic said, you can't do that because they're not children. And the Supreme Court said, well, we have considered children to be, which is progeny. You know, you don't have to get your panties in a bunch or whatever. It's your children are your progeny, right? So they've considered embryos to be protected under that statute before, or have to apply before. So the question is, should we just read into the law that it excludes embryos based on their location? And they're like, the legislature could work it that way, but we don't have a reason to interpret the law that way. So yes, they can sue for this. And again, it didn't change the criminal code for like murder or anything like that. But yes, the parents could sue this clinic that obviously was negligent and should be liable for not securing the embryos. And you can say, well, that person who did it should be in trouble. Yeah, and I would say the clinic should probably come after that person, the patient or whatever, who did that. But as far as the clinic's obligation to the parents, they totally failed. So yes, they should be able to sue. And it boggles my mind how many people, I'm not surprised by the pro-choice people not really caring about the choice being taken away from these parents, because they don't want to acknowledge that the embryos are human beings and alive, because that upsets their narrative. Because if you start acknowledging them, of course you're going to acknowledge that they're persons that deserve protection in the womb, and then that starts destroying their business. I'm really annoyed by Republicans who basically bent the knee, or just kind of bent over, and are taking the narrative of the left and are being submissive in this instead of just telling the truth about what happened. And people don't know the truth of what happened in the court case, that people are like, oh, the Supreme Court is quoting God to say the embryos are children. And that's not what happened. Just go read the decision yourself. Go read it yourself. So there's a concurrence or something that mentioned something along those lines, but not in the decision. The decision was very logical, absolutely logical. So I wish that Trump and other Republicans would tell the truth about what happened in the court case, instead of scrambling, oh, we have to make sure we protect IVF and have no limitations on it. I'm like, no limitations. So what? They can have as many embryos as they want created and then frozen in time forever or used for experiments. This doesn't. And I know there's plenty of people who consider themselves to be pro-life who are probably used IVF to make families, but there is like some inconsistency there with if you believe that life starts at conception, that it would be fine to treat the embryos, have them frozen forever, or donate them for experiments, or to to kind of select which one is best based off of whatever. There's some real ethical problems that the pro-life movement Republicans are gonna have to actually talk about. But as far as it being some kind of major threat to IVF, if that ruling is a major threat to IVF, then there are problems that need to be fixed. So I don't appreciate all the narratives around it. Just go read the ruling itself. As far as Roe v. Wade, the court made the right decision. Roe v. Wade was never a good legal decision. Even Ginsburg could acknowledge that it wasn't a great ruling. And Joe Biden saying he wants to restore Roe, I just want everyone to know that that could mean that states could have abortions up until the moment of birth. It would mean that people could abort viable, healthy babies. I just want people to know that when people say, I want to, because Biden's been asked many times, and his press secretary has been asked many times, what kind of limitations? And they're like, well, they want to restore Roe v. Wade. Okay, Roe v. Wade allows states like Colorado, that has been having late-term abortions for a very long time, to be able to abort healthy, viable fetuses for healthy women. There's a clinic, the Boulder Clinic, where Warren Hearn works. He's done 2 sex-selective abortions. So, just so we're clear, Roe v. Wade can mean literally no limitations if that's what the state allows. Roe v. Wade stops states from saving the lives of the unborn. That's what it does, like in the first and second trimester. Okay? That's what it does. And there are other rulings that kind of tightened it up or whatever after the fact. But Roe v. Wade is a very radical ruling. And it's unfortunate that it lasted for 50 years and gave so many women brain rot. And it's really sad to me that there's so many people who feel that they need this power to kill their offspring electively, no questions asked, no obstruction at all, in order to feel free. We are a very damaged society that women feel that they need that in order to have their freedoms or to be equal to men. We are defective as a nation, if that is what we believe. And it's clearly what many people believe. And he is right that that on the ballot box time and time again, that people have proven that they want abortion. It's true. And that is sick, and we need to still fight back and change people's hearts and minds and reason and stuff with people. And that's not a fight that we can just lay down and give up, because it is a major human rights violation. As far as the Kate Cox story, Kate Cox, she wanted to have an abortion. Her baby was at 20 weeks. From all the available information, her baby had trisomy 18, which most babies do not survive long after that. And some of that probably has to do with how they're treated by the medical community, where they kind of like, well, they're going to die. Like, there's horror stories about parents trying to get more care for their children. But they do often die, and they didn't expect the baby to, if the baby, lived to term, to not live for very long. And that is heartbreaking. But the doctor in Texas, you can absolutely get an abortion if it is like a life affirming situation, and you're gonna die, or it's likely, or in the best medical judgment of the professionals, that that's gonna happen. Kate Cox's doctors did not say that. They said it wasn't imminent. It literally said that. And they gave a standard where something could happen, but they did not give the standard that is within the law. And if I was her doctor, and I thought she needed it, and I wanted her to be able to have an abortion, I would have had the strong language that correlates with the law. If I was an abortion activist group who wanted her to not actually have the abortion there in Texas, but this to be a major story for her to go on different news programs and so on, and eventually be at the State of the Union and be addressed by the president, I would have wanted her to not be able to get her abortion there, and to continue talking about it, so they could advance the agenda of having a lot more babies being killed. And it is a very tragic situation to get a diagnosis like that. And she had already had a few C-sections, and at this point in time, they do want another child. So whatever child she has in the future, it is likely that she's going to have a C-section, but she didn't want to have a C-section on a child, for a child that was going to die. But a abortion that late is very brutal, very brutal. And when I talked about this before I showed the abortion, someone got mad and was like, "I'm leaving." And I'm like, I'm just trying to be truthful with you guys. That at that point in time, they do rip off the arms and the legs of the baby, and they crush their skull. That's what happens that late. So I wouldn't call that a mercy killing. And she did say, like, to the asking like a permission for the abortion, kind of let it be known that they are basically trading this child for a hypothetical child in the future, in case they can have like another baby. So I can understand I guess why she would want that, but that's definitely not in the law. So you had people like Chris Christie and other folks were like, "Oh, they got that wrong. They got the Supreme Court got that wrong." No, according to their law, that they made the correct decision. If she was in danger, absolutely, she could have been allowed to have that abortion. But even the hospital, considering her having an abortion, they didn't get like according to the AG, they didn't get the second opinion and other kind of stuff first or whatever, but they wanted to seek permission for the court to go ahead and do it. But they made it clear, like in the decision, like if you have an emergency, yes, you can do it. You don't have to ask the Supreme Court. You don't have to ask in advance. But they wanted to make sure their butts were covered, and they didn't even have the guts to say, like, within our best medical reasonable judgment, or whatever the standard is. I can't remember the exact phrasing. I wrote about it on the website. So that's the truth about the Kate Cox situation. And that's another thing of Republicans, many Republicans being scared to just kind of tell the truth. I know it. You can't tell the whole thing in a soundbite. I know it takes a while to tell the story. But what's the alternative? To push for no restrictions so millions can continue to die? So I'm not too big of a fan of my party. But anyway, the union speech was a hot mess. Hot mess. I didn't mean to talk about it for that long. So I'm going to switch gears here, and try not to talk entirely too long about this, but I would have rather have geeked out for this for an hour complaining about Biden. But I love Dragon Ball Z growing up, and I guess I don't have still the same passion for it right now, but still love it. Still love the memories that I shared with my siblings and friends. Literally would make friends because I would draw characters or whatever, or I'd have some kind of memorabilia, and people were like, "Oh, that's cool." And you're just like, new best friend, and you forge friendships over common interests, and so me and so many people around the world were very sad last night and today. I'm seeing more TikToks and other things about it, about the passing of Akira Toriyama, who created Dragon Ball, and he died at 68. And that seems so young because that's around the age of my parents. And it just seems so. He was working on more projects still, but he had I believe it was a blood clot, but he actually died on the first. So I don't know if they just didn't announce it until last night or what, but they already had like a small funeral with family and friends. So maybe they just wanted to kind of keep that really private until, the family and everyone else had time to mourn. But Dragon Ball Z is enormous in the anime world. For some people, it's their gateway anime. For some people, it's their only anime that they would watch, with the fight scenes and the action and the storylines. And there's more complex, deeper animes with better writing in it than Dragon Ball Z. But some characters like Vegeta, I would say the Prince of all Saiyans, I think he's one of the best characters in fiction. His dialogue was always fantastic. He was the prince of this race of Saiyans, which the main character Goku is also a part of. There's like only a handful of them left. But his father, he was taken from his father when he was a little boy. The Saiyans aren't good people, but Frieza was worse, and so he was a warlord. He took Vegeta, destroyed the planet, killed his father, and so on. And Vegeta knew this but still had to serve him and is just trying to accumulate power to be able to one day defeat him. And really they were just trying to, I think, pump up their numbers and strength when they came to Earth to recruit Goku, and it just kind of went very wrong for them. But and then they found out about the Dragon Balls, which you gather all 7 Dragon Balls, and the dragon comes and you make a wish. And so Vegeta wanted to wish for immortality to probably be an evil universe warlord himself, but he did want the power to defeat Frieza. And but then he ran into Goku, who was this, on his planet would have been a low class, low level soldier, who just loved to fight, had a natural talent for it, and ended up surpassing him. And thus his obsession with like trying to defeat Goku began, and his ego and his pride being bruised and trying to regain that honor by trying to surpass him. And he would just have the greatest dialogue. But I watched Dragon Ball as a kid. They didn't air it all at first when we were young, so much of Dragon Ball we didn't finish until they aired it on Toonami. But me and my brother watched it when we were very little. And then Dragon Ball Z, and my sister Katrina, who's in the chat, she hopped in there sometime in the Namek saga. She saw Vegeta crying, and then she hopped on to it, and then she figured out that Trunks was the son of Bulma and Vegeta, and we're just like, they're not even together. Like, what are you talking about? But she totally nailed that. And that just so much changed the dynamic of the show. And we would go to when they were taking too long to air on Toonami, we'd go to the comic book store to buy tapes, or rent. We were renting tapes from the comic book store, and then we would buy them. And I guess we still have VHS tapes. You couldn't just download them or watch them on Funimation or Crunchyroll or whatever. And Toonami would like air like Final Atonement. That was episode when Vegeta blew himself up to defeat Boo, and then they would roll it back to the beginning of like the tournament saga, or sometimes they would roll it back all the way to like the very first episode. It's like, dude, just play the rest of the show, please stop going back. And but it was really a great ride. My favorite episode will forever be Union of Rivals, when Vegeta and Goku joined together to become Vegito to beat Majin Buu. Just the tension between the both of them. Well, Goku had like straight up desperation. Goku's the main character. He needed to find some more power to defeat the bad guy. In case you're not following along, I'm trying to explain it. And then he saw Vegeta came back. Vegeta had actually killed himself to as a sacrifice to try to destroy this creature Majin Buu, that was revived because of the two of them in their fight. Um, but Vegeta wanted to accumulate power in order to kind of to fight Goku to finally best him, and he felt like he had done that, and so he knocked him out, kind of like a sucker punch from behind thing. Knocked out Goku. Probably felt like, okay, I dominated the fight. I had the coolest moves, etc. I proved myself, and he's probably feeling himself. He said this like goodbye to his son and hugged him, and knew that he probably wasn't going to a better place. He had a conversation with Piccolo, who's this Namekian. If you ever seen this green guy, that's Piccolo. And he's like, you're not going to the good place. He's just like, okay, fine. I got to do what I got to do. And he blew himself up, just trying to destroy Majin Buu, this evil bad guy. But then he didn't, there were still pieces of him left, and he came back together. So the Vegeta had to find out that not only was his sacrifice in vain, but also that Goku had this other form that was far more powerful than the Super Saiyan 2 that they had. So he was probably feeling like garbage, and then Goku's just like, hey, can we fuse together in one body? And then Goku said a speech. He's like, if we keep this up, like, he's gonna destroy the whole planet. And Vegeta's just trying to blow it off and say, what do I care? He's like, wake up, Majin Buu's eaten everyone we've cared about. Everyone is gone, even Bulma. And Vegeta has this like iconic kind of a shocked face and noise that he makes. And he's like, they're trapped inside of him. They can't even die. And I can go on and quote the rest of it, but it's a great speech that Goku gives about, like, we've lost our old race, Vegeta. Let's not lose this one too. And then they end up fusing together with these like special earrings. And so it takes Vegeta a second to put it on. And then Goku's like, oh, by the way, we'll be fused together. And so it was just really high stakes. And a really wonderful moment between these two rivals. I mean, this was called Union of Rivals, and Super kind of messed that up because they said that they would have only really been joined for 30 minutes. So it was like they reached back in time and kind of ruined one of my favorite episodes. But I love the show. I love the show. I have many great memories and conversations with Katrina and Tina and Gino, just sitting up talking about the show and writing fan fiction and posters. And I have a wonderful wall scroll of Goku, Vegeta, Gohan, and Goku Vegeta, Trunks, and Gohan. And we had magazine books that we buy. We have like playing cards, we have Dragon Balls, and this is the number one complimented piece of clothing that I have when I go out. People are like, oh, it's so cool. I've obviously like cuter or better looking clothes than this, but this is the number one thing that I get complimented on. So I don't know, you just can't be overstated how much Dragon Ball Z has impacted the world. People in the United States love it. People in the Black community love it. People, obviously in Asian countries, will, Japan, and it was such a iconic juggernaut in the manga and in anime. But the Hispanic community really, 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 really loves Dragon Ball. So I guess that's they loved it. Like, if you look at like top countries where people watch Dragon Ball, most of them are like Latin American or Latin American countries. So it's just a dominant world force. So he really made something iconic that was a huge part of so many people's adulthoods and childhoods and so on. So I can't think of any fandom. I don't know if this is true for my siblings, but definitely not all of them, but I guess Katrina can answer this in the comments if this is the case. There isn't anything that I've loved as far as fandom that I've loved more than Dragon Ball Z. Not Spider-Man or Batman or Superman or anything Marvel, anything DC, not Star Wars, not Star Trek. It's Dragon Ball Z. It's Dragon Ball Z, and it'll probably always be Dragon Ball Z. I don't have a strong love for fandom like I used to with things. I'm very much, I guess, focused on, I guess, things like this. And my sister said maybe Henry Cavill. That's not a fandom thing. He's just a very good looking man. Uh, not even Henry Cavill. It's Dragon Ball Z. But even the books that I write now, a lot of my writing, I cut my teeth just writing fan fiction. And I had some pretty popular fan fiction on fanfiction.net. So yeah, just writing stories about characters that I loved, and getting feedback from other people, and having that discipline to put out multiple stuff, and so on, and chapter after chapter after chapter. And I would say that built me up to the point where I eventually just started writing my own things. So it's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal. And I know I don't I don't know how many of you watching were into Dragon Ball Z or loved it or know anything about it, but I am a big nerd myself and have been. There's other animes that I've really loved and really enjoyed, but again, nothing like Dragon Ball Z. So Akira Toriyama, you know, you did great work, and I'm very grateful for the memories and the content, and I I think content creators, any content creator would just be so thankful to have just a little bit of his success and to make a little bit of the impact that he made, because he's a juggernaut. He's a legend. So 68, that is, to me, that's quite young. So that's a tragedy. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. You guys can go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate, because it does cost for streaming around my website, all that stuff. So if you guys can support, thank you. And please check out different merch I have available at blacktnews.com. Different t-shirts and mugs and so on that you guys can check out there. You obviously won't be able to find this there at the website, but I got this from Hot Topic some years ago, so I don't know if I would doubt they probably still sell it because it's kind of old, but it's really cool because it has these zippers on the side, so I can take off these sleeves. So if it gets like hot in the summer or something, I don't need these sleeves, but it's it's pretty neat. I don't think people think about orange and blue too much. Or if you see orange and blue, your mind probably immediately goes to like Dragon Ball Z, if not Naruto, but it's probably Dragon Ball Z. Anyway, you guys can check out some of my books on Amazon. I write action adventure, historical fiction, romance, fantasy, all kinds of different stuff you guys can check out. So just search my name on Amazon. God bless you guys, and I will see you on Monday.